Hey, Josh, how you doing?
Hi, Tara. Good to see you.
Hey, so thank you everybody who is out there watching. Thank you for joining us for our first installment of Worldsmiths. Outland Entertainment has a ton of artists and creators and art authors that we work with, and we want to share those people with you because we think they're really cool. And we know that you want to hear all about what they're making. So today we're starting with Josh Gillingham. He is the creator of our Althingi World, which has started with a card game, One Will Rise, and it is being shipped as we speak, and we're just waiting for it to arrive on our doorsteps to check it out. And then the Crescent and the Northern Star, which is a collection of short stories that are based in the background of with the historical background of medieval Vikings and Muslims, which did kind of like cross paths. So, and you can read more about that in the stories, but Josh will also talk a little bit about it today. So Althingi is one of our worlds. Outland creates transmedia worlds, which means we have, different universes, different stories. But then there's other stories in those same worlds that aren't retellings. They are different stories and they're different types of media. Viking Verse is one of our largest, and Josh is actually one of the authors of Old Norse for Modern Times, which it's really neat. And then it also has 2 novels, 3 comics, and I feel like I'm missing something, just the handbook. So
I think there's an upcoming RPG, right? There's an RPG upcoming soon, hopefully.
I don't know how official that is. So
okay, fingers crossed. Yeah. Anyways,
there is another comic coming too.
Yeah.
So Josh has agreed to join me for a cup of mead while we discuss his Althingi World and the current Kickstarter. So I'm going to introduce mine first. It's a really cool bottle.
Ooh. What does that say?
It says Odin's skull. And
I love it.
Of course, he's got the horned helmet. And you would think, oh, it's probably from like Arkansas, where I am right now. But no, It's actually from Denmark.
Very cool.
And then imported to Connecticut. So maybe that's the problem. But this is a Nordic honey wine with hops and sour apple juice and cinnamon added.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
So what are you drinking?
Well, I have a mead as well. Before I do that, though, I got to say we are just like feeling this energy here. We didn't even plan this, but it just happens to be Norwegian Independence Day.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, May 17th. So to all you Norwegians tuning into the show, we're recording May 17th. Happy Norwegian Independence Day to you. And very excited to be sharing about this project. So I have, here I've got with me Sweet Mead Honey Wine, brewed here in Canada, in Kelowna. And it says an ancient drink of kings and poets. So how's that for an introduction? So haven't even opened it up yet. I'm just going to pop it open right now and fill myself a glass. But this is great. It's I had to go to 3 different stores to find one. There's not a lot of mead around these places. So I'm glad you've got some there. I've got some here, and we can go ahead and get started.
So is there a certain toast that Vikings give when they drink together?
Yes, there is. Now, we'll do the Old Norse one because that one's very Viking-esque, and so they would say "skål."
Skål.
Skål. All right, there we go. Very sweet. Very lots of honey notes on mine.
Mine is strong.
Very strong. Okay,
it's 19%.
All right.
Mine's 19%.
Wow, 19%. What's mine at? Mine's at 14%. So your meat is more Viking than my meat. There we go.
I'm probably lighter weight than you two. So and cinnamon. I can really taste the cinnamon in that.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got our mead. We've got our intro. So why don't you just tell us about your Althingi world?
Sure. So step into history. Like Althingi is based in actual history, Viking history, specifically in one particular location is Iceland. And now when you think Vikings, you might be thinking of Norway or Sweden or Denmark. And yes, the Vikings were there. In fact, the Vikings went all over the place. But the reason why Iceland is unique is that once Christianization started to happen in Scandinavia, particularly in Norway, and the system of different sort of tribal chieftains who controlled local fjords or islands was sort of conglomerated into one monarch. A lot of those people didn't like that. They wanted to retain their old ways of life. They wanted to retain their old Norse law codes, their language, and so they ended up moving to Iceland. Now, this was kind of a convenient thing for the Vikings that wanted to sort of escape this on the mainland, because this has kind of recently been discovered. Vikings, we know, like to explore. It was, as far as they could tell, uninhabited. There are some archaeological digs that have shown that maybe there were some Irish monks there, maybe 300 or 400 years before the Vikings. But the Irish monks are like, we look for solitude. This is too much solitude. This is way too out there. So the Vikings start to go to Iceland, start to colonize it basically. And the card game is set in about 930 AD. And that's when things were really ramping up. In fact, the word Althingi just means like a great gathering. And these are not just like a gathering like, hey, let's get together. These were actual sort of formal gatherings that they would have. They used to have them back in Norway, and they still did to a certain extent. But in terms of their purpose and their function, this was happening in Iceland the same way it happened with the Vikings. And because they were so far out, take a look at a map if you want to. Iceland is like way out there, and you got to think medieval Europe, right? So you're only getting there by boat, not by plane. A lot of these customs and even the language, so many pieces of things that sort of just dissolved and sort of blew away on the main culture, or in the main on the mainland, because of things happening in Europe, were preserved in Iceland. Very cool. So Althingi is set around 930 AD in Iceland. It focuses mostly on Vikings, or centers on Vikings and some of the adventures they had.
Cool, great. Okay, so you said yes, they're in Scandinavia and Norway, Sweden, etc. And they're in Iceland, but you said they were all over the place. And so it kind of reminds me of like playing the game Civilization, where I explored like all over the place, and sometimes I would colonize like way out there just because it was like a perfect place to put my city. Is the stories that are in the anthology itself, like are they exploration stories, or are there other kinds of stories in there too?
You know what, that's a great question. So the card game sort of focuses on events happening in Iceland. The anthology allows us to kind of explore different things that the Vikings were up to at the time. So for example, we have evidence that Vikings raided all the way down the coast in France. In fact, several sort of colonies were formed in France, and Normandy, for example, was founded by the Normans. Those were Viking raiders who made a deal with the king at the time. So you kind of see evidence of that. They went all the way around the coast to Spain, and if you know your history, around 900 AD, there is, it's known as the Golden Age of Islamic Spain. There's this incredible empire that is there, and in terms of science, technology, politics, all sorts of things, they're just thriving. And so the Vikings interacted there, sometimes in trade, sometimes in conflict. There's sort of evidence of a bit of both. My co-editor, Muhammad Ahmed, who started the Islamic science fiction project, super cool guy, he came on to be a co-editor with me. And as we dug through the sources, I know I had these Viking sources. He was able to look at the Arabic sources, the sources in Arabic. And we found this one instance of there was a small settlement of Vikings actually in Morocco, which is even further south in Spain. And the records show that the Arabs who were living there, or the Islamic people who were living there, really liked the cheese the Vikings made. So that was a great find. But yeah, so they explored all the way down the coast. That way, pretty much all the way through the Mediterranean. Byzantium at the time, the Byzantine Empire was very powerful, and the emperor himself actually had an elite force of bodyguards. And these bodyguards were called the Varangian Guard, and they were mostly basically Viking mercenaries. They would kind of recruit the biggest, beefiest guys, and they would get in to be in the king's sort of retinue, and they'd protect him. One of the most famous Varangian guards is Harald Hardrada, who ends up becoming king of Norway later on. And his whole epic saga kind of takes him even into England and the UK, so that's kind of wild. And we keep going east, and we have the journal Ibn Fadlan. Now, he was an emissary from the Caliphate in Baghdad. He was sent north to go and mostly on a diplomatic mission to try to form some political alliances. And he keeps a personal record. And as he travels north, if you go north a long ways, his trip was quite long, even like by our standards today. And he actually has a journal entry where he talks about these people called the Rus. Now, the Rus are Vikings. They're the Vikings that lived in Russia. And if you look at the word Rus and if you look at the word Russia, you can kind of see where the name Russia comes from, right? Kind of founded, at least in that northern part, by the Rus, or the Russian Vikings. And so he records this sort of firsthand account, unlike any other that we have in sort of our written records. And he's talking about, there's these tattoos. He's describing the tattoos he sees in their arms, right? He kind of describes their physical forms, kind of what they're wearing, what kind of weapons they have. In fact, he even provides a firsthand eyewitness account of one of the most famous Viking customs, at least as portrayed in our sort of movies and popular literature, which is the burial at sea, where a Viking is laid in their ship with all their treasure and is sent off and burned. And he actually got to witness that. He describes it in detail. It's kind of half fascination, half horror. Obviously, there's some strong, religious beliefs in Islam around those sorts of things. And it's really interesting to see Ibn Fadlan in his journal, even way back then. We're talking 928 AD, talking about this other culture, kind of in the way that we do sometimes too, right? Sometimes we're fascinated. Sometimes we're like, oh, I would never do things like that. And you kind of see that human factor with him. So, I mean, I literally just spanned like all of Europe, and there's evidence based on archaeological finds of interactions even further. But yeah, so this is what we wanted to explore in the anthology. And if you're thinking to yourself, like, I've never heard of any of this before, that's not surprising, because this has not been a huge academic focus. In fact, we feel like it's kind of been overlooked, given the amount of evidence there actually is. And part of that, I think, is to do with our own sort of cultural narrative that we have of, it was the Greeks, and then it was the Romans, and then it was, Western Christendom. And then we kind of just follow this one line through history and ignore everything else that was happening on the sidelines, not even the sidelines, of maybe like what Western civilization would consider the sidelines. A lot of these cultures were more advanced. We think about the Vikings, right? Traveling to Vinland, North America, so many hundreds of years before other mainland Europeans could. We think about the mathematics and the philosophy that was being developed by the Islamic cultures at this time. In fact, much of the Greek philosophy that we have is preserved only because they were translating them from Greek into Arabic at places like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. So the more you get into it, the more fascinating it is. And I know some people sort of scratch their heads a bit at like Vikings and Muslims, but it's incredible. And the stories are this is not like a research paper. You can tell Muhammad and I did a lot of research, but the authors were sort of given a character and given some sort of historical tidbit, and they're sort of trying to weave that into a story that would make its way into the universe. And so this project has really taken this Althingi universe, or world as you called it, from sort of this one local event to this whole sort of like global worldwide thing. So it's been really cool to explore that.
That is cool, because I mean, absolutely, the first reaction I had is, what, Vikings and Muslims? That doesn't, I mean, sure, maybe I just don't know about it. So the fact that like it's intriguing and it's different is cool, but like you said, there's not the attention paid to it. And one of the great things about fiction is that it inspires people to do things in real life as well. So like, for instance, I know like the movie The Martian has inspired many people to pursue like space exploration. Gosh, brain is not working. It's that 19%, right. I swear.
You're totally right.
It's like I took a shot. But anyway,
totally.
it inspires people to pursue those in more intellectual studies and more academic studies. So it's really cool that you have this collection of stories that is based on this thing that really exists, and it inspires. And even though it's not real, even though it's not true, there's truth in it, and that truth can be explored on a different plane. So I think that's super cool that you guys have come together. So you mentioned Muhammad Ahmed. He started the Islamic Science Fiction Society. Is that what it was?
Project, yes.
Project. So
yes,
is there
back
science,
in 2005. Yeah.
Is there science fiction in this?
No, it should clarify, this is historical fiction. And so when I approached him, actually, Alana Abbott, who's one of the editors at Outland there, was actually the one who suggested the topic at first, because she had read something and she thought, can we work this in somehow? And then she had read smart. His anthology. She's great. We love Alana. Everybody loves Alana. Alana's awesome. She had read his anthology or heard of his anthology called A Mosque Among the Stars. And this was one of his first sort of compilations of Islamic science fiction. And yeah, if you think that like Vikings and Muslims sort of like make some people scratch their heads a bit, some like Islamic science fiction. Same thing, right? Like what? But totally. So they're really cool stories of, what does it look like, Islamic cultures in 500 years, like when we're traveling between planets, or what does it look like in 1,000 years when we can travel between galaxies? Like, what does that even look like? So he's had a lot of, he's done some amazing work in that area. And when I called him, I was thinking he might, who's this crazy guy calling me about doing stuff about Vikings? I do Islamic stuff, but it just so happened that he was aware of some of these connections, and in fact,
that's cool.
had been intrigued himself. He'd been meaning to follow up and dig more into that. He's very interested in history and philosophy as well, and so we hit it off like right away. In fact, I remember his words were something like, I said, this is kind of weird. You never met me before, but you want to do an anthology on Vikings and Muslims? And he's like, Vikings, yeah, I love Vikings. Everybody loves Vikings. Let's do this. So it's been really fun to get to know him through the project. He's been great to work with, and I am super proud of the anthology we were able to put together.
That's cool. So, okay, so let's talk about the anthology. It is currently on Kickstarter. You mentioned earlier that you check it every 30 seconds because that helps it grow. So where are we at right now?
Definitely helps it.
As this is like Monday night.
Monday night, we're so close to breaking $10,000. So yeah, we're like literally like, I think we're like $100 away from breaking $10,000. So super exciting. And after that, it's not too much longer to our goal. So I'm hopeful maybe we'll fund this week, maybe we'll fund early next week, but I'm very, very kind of got all my fingers crossed and got a good feeling that this Kickstarter is going to come through. So yeah, I think we're sitting at like 83% right now. So we're getting close.
So close. We've got a week. So tell us about the pledge levels. Tell us what we can possibly get if we decide that we want to pledge this project.
Sure. Totally. So, and before talking about the pledge levels, I always like to give a bit of a caveat. Some people are familiar with Kickstarter, like they know how it works, and they've backed projects before, like they get it. Other people who have not done a Kickstarter before or backed a Kickstarter might not know what it is. And I get this question all the time, when I share projects like this. People say, well, is this like a charity? Am I like donating to a charity? And the answer is definitely no. Kickstarter is not a charity, okay? Kickstarter is a way to basically pre-order or kind of almost like pre-buy things you think are awesome. So when you go to the store, like for example, let's say the board game store, and there's always incredible games at the board game store, but you don't get to pick what games are there, right? You look at the shelves and whatever's there, it's kind of what you get. With Kickstarter, it's super cool. You get to look at like hundreds, if not thousands of projects. And if there's one that really catches your eye, that you think is awesome, you can back it and you can make it happen. It's like making things appear on the shelf that you wish were there, right? So when you back a Kickstarter, you get a product, right? Whether it's a book, lots of board games are kickstarted through that platform. You are purchasing something. So I just wanted to clarify that. In terms of how you could back Althingi, we've got a bunch of different levels. First level is ebook. I know ebooks are super handy, especially if you have an e-reader. You can, like hundreds of thousands of books you could have on one tablet, which is pretty sweet. Much easier than carrying 100,000 books home from the library, right? So we've got the ebook. That's our first level. If you're like me, I'm a little bit old school. I like the physical paperback copy, and so you can back for that as well. As you mentioned, Tara, there's a card game as well that goes with it, Althingi Will Rise. And so you can also get the book and the game in combo, which I think is so cool because you can kind of meet characters totally, and then you can sort of find out their backstories and figure out kind of where they're from and learn more through the anthology. So that's a lot of fun. We successfully kickstarted the card game back in the fall, so there is still available some of the Kickstarter exclusive extras, which include a metal coin, which is like a first player token, super premium component. It's got like runic carvings on both sides, and a neoprene playing mat. And I got to tell you, as a big card gamer and board gamer myself, it's annoying. Oh, do you have one of the ones they did for one for Apex?
I do. Oh, I have the one for Apex. And first of all, I mean, our artwork is gorgeous, period. Outland's artwork is gorgeous. But the Apex artwork is incredible. And the way it transfers to the mat is beautiful. Like I've seen really crappy looking play mats. This is not one of those. And
that's great. That's great. Oh, and another one. Oh, beautiful. Look at that. Yeah.
And awesome. It's really good quality. Like it's not going to break. So
that's great. I have to add I worked with Jeremy on the art for the playmat, and it's so cool because it incorporates the game art, but it also helps you lay out the game and like see where the card should be on the table, which is super helpful for new players. It's not a hard game to learn. It plays 30 to 40 minutes, so perfect for sort of newer gamers who are maybe just learning things. It's got enough of the kind of mechanical complexity for more advanced players too. But anyways, I have to mention you can also back for those premium components. So that's like book and card game and premium components. Last but not least, Althingi's Outland has put out other anthologies. This is not the first one. In fact, I think we are number 14 or 15. So you can also back the top tier to get every single anthology in the Outland collection, which is like, if you are a book lover, it's just like a dream. Like, can you imagine just coming home with like 14 books full of different stories? Tara, you're familiar with some of the different anthologies, right?
Yeah, so we've got one that's focused on fairy stories. We've got one that's focused on dinosaur stories. We've got we've got a trilogy that's focused on like the rogues and brigands and, you know, those people who are good people, maybe not.
In their hearts, in their own ways, yeah.
Right. We've got a variety of fantasy and sci-fi anthologies that feature some incredible authors and some up and coming authors as well. So that's definitely a boon. Definitely.
Great. Yeah. So any of those levels you could back Althingi for. Honestly, every dollar counts. And like I said, we're so close to breaking that $10,000 mark. You're going to be joining with, you know, literally hundreds of other people back in this project. It's kind of a cool feeling. I just feel like, especially this COVID year, you know, we've been so separate, we've been so apart, we haven't been able to do things together. And I realize it's online, but I tell you, like, there's a moment in a Kickstarter campaign that if you're a backer, and when you hit that funding goal, right, it's just like fireworks and everybody's like celebrating together. Everybody feels like, look, we did this together. We made this thing that was just this awesome idea, and it's something that's actually going to happen. So I'd encourage you to check it out. Althingi, the Crescent of the Northern Star. It's on Kickstarter, and we are on until May 25th. So you got to get on there. There's a limited amount of time that you have to take part in that.
So we're going to meet the goal. I'm confident we're going to do that.
I'm confident.
And in some cases, you would think, oh, well, they've already met the goal. They don't need me. But we have what's called stretch goals, which are just as important. And like you mentioned, especially this last year with COVID and us kind of building a community, the Kickstarter community is so cool because there are people at home making wonderful things. And we get to come together and support them in that, because not all of them are Stephen King, you know, not all of them already have this name for themselves and the money and the backing. So we kind of have to come together to support each other. So the Kickstarter community is cool. We make something, we make it happen. And then what happens after we meet the goal?
Great question. I was going to add one thing there too. Kickstarter community is awesome. The other thing, I know it's great to, you know, support artists and stuff like that too. From a selfish perspective, the stuff that is on Kickstarter is way cooler than anything you're going to see in the store.
Absolutely.
For example, like in board games, like the board games that like get put in the big box stores like Walmart and all that kind of stuff. Those games are, I'm not trying to knock anybody here, but they're like lame, like Monopoly reskins and stuff like that.
They're like watered down, or like they're just,
The most cutting edge, the most beautiful art, the most like, edge of the market type of things are on Kickstarter. So that's another, I'm always like, support artists, but also selfishly, everything that is like super cool is on Kickstarter. So anyways, you can tell I've had the lemonade, but it's good lemonade. So Kool-Aid, that's the one I meant to say. So stretch goals, let's talk about stretch goals. If you never back to Kickstarter, once you pass the funding goal, oftentimes we'll set up stretch goals, and stretch goals are like, hey, if we overfund, there's extra things we'd love to add into this, and we'll add them if we hit this goal. And the first goal, and this is one of the reasons I love working with Outland, is first goal is to pay the authors even higher than industry standard rates. So right now we are, totally awesome, right? We're already paying authors industry standard rates. That's 8 cents per word, up to 6,000 words. We're going to boost that up to 10 cents per word, which doesn't sound like a lot per word, but you think about a $6,000 story, that adds up to quite a bit. And we are so, I'm so glad that that's going to be our first stretch goal, because if we hit that, these authors have worked so hard to create these stories, the research that's gone into this, it'll be really cool to kind of see that rewarded. So that's stretch goal number one. Stretch goal number two is that we're going to provide some swag for people who back the project. So we're going to make some custom bookmarks using Althingi art, and we're also going to make some stickers. And so you can kind of leave your own mark on history wherever you want with the stickers, and you can use your bookmark on your anthology. So those are the two stretch goals we have set up right now. And hey, if folks end up backing this project, and if things go bananas, we'll make some more stretch goals. We'll make it even more awesome. So
that's cool. Yeah. That's cool. So first of all, in my imagination, I'm thinking of Althingi stickers all over at least North America. Just walking along and just sitting, I've never been in, I see an Althingi sticker and be like, hey,
I know that. Yeah.
But the other thing is we talked about the Kickstarter community and this creative community, and you talked about one of the stretch goals being to pay our authors more. it is so important to pay our authors more because they're the ones who make the stuff that we do. All of this back here, everything on Netflix and Disney and all of that, like all of the books you've ever read, even like silly stuff like cereal boxes, like every word that's ever been written, somebody got paid to do that. And those things that enrich our lives the most, like we want them to make more money so that they don't have to work a side job like some of us have to do. And they can focus on creating because that's what they're called to do. That's what they're good at. And that's what we love to get from them. So we want to make sure that we help them as much as they can so that they can make more stuff, basically. It's selfish. Totally. It's community and we're giving to the community, but it's also a little selfish because we just want more stuff, right?
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think everybody knows that like one person, like a friend or relative who's like an incredible musician or like an incredible artist. And then they're working 40 hours a week, like bussing tables at a restaurant, which is like all respect of, folks who work in the restaurant industry, if that's what you want to do. But yeah, we have these artists that if they have platforms like Kickstarter where they can be supported, we can kind of like unlock their potential and help them sort of like achieve their goals and dreams. So,
and in this case, we're bringing light to, as we mentioned before, we're bringing light to something that's not well known, that's not widely known, and not even studied in academia very much. So that's like a super beautiful thing. We're making this world better. So let's reach those stretch goals so that we can pay our authors more. Yeah.
If I might say one more thing on top of that, like just like you said, it's understudied. Both Muhammad and I also think this is a really big piece of our history that we kind of need to change our perspective on. There's kind of this myth, I'm going to say this myth of sort of separate cultures. And it's funny, we chat about this because we see this both in sort of the Scandinavian history community, if you want to call it that, as well as sort of Islamic history of, this idea that, well, maybe at one time there was this sort of pure culture that was, totally, great and everything was perfect. And if only we could get back to that pure culture, that pure Viking culture, that pure Islamic culture, then the world would be, a better place. And unfortunately, that's the root of a lot of fundamentalist extremism that inspires violence, that inspires hatred, and that's a really destructive narrative. So part of our goal in doing this work, we think it's really important beyond just the creative aspect, is sort of the social element of changing that story and saying, look, we've had these connections for well over 1,000 years, and if we're going to succeed in the future, we need to stay connected and sort of celebrate ways that we can connect. We don't have to be the same. We could be different. We can have different views, but let's find those connection points and let's celebrate those.
Yeah, agreed. And cool. Okay, so I guess the only thing is can you give us a taste of any of the anthology stories?
That is so tough. There's like, I literally could not pick a favorite story. I was on another podcast the other day and say, what's your favorite story? I'm like, you can't ask that. You can't ask an editor. But I'll just start from the beginning. I feel like it's the only fair way to go. So Speaking with Giants is the opening story in the anthology. It's by Linnea Hardesuker. If you recognize that name, it's because you probably heard of her trilogy called The Golden Wolf Saga, published through HarperCollins. Huge name author. I think that series is the biggest Viking historical fiction series since Bernard Cornwell, probably, whose work inspired the Vikings TV show. So if you're into historical fiction, if you like Vikings, she's like one of the leaders in that area, I think, just overall. And she draws some really cool lines in her narrative. There's sort of an Arabic trader scholar, and there's a Viking who's kind of been in and out of slavery, but he's also a warrior, kind of a mercenary. And they kind of draw some lines. She draws some lines of connection between the Viking idea of apocalypse, which is called Ragnarok. If you saw the Marvel movie Thor Ragnarok, they talk a bit about the doom of the gods. There's kind of more to it in the myths, and then the Islamic idea of apocalypse too. And both of them feature this idea that the giants are going to come from the north at some point and destroy the world. And so these two characters, while they're so different in so many different ways, kind of draw this line of connection between the two stories, and they're concerned about this. And so their exploration of that takes place as part of the narrative. I'm not going to give too much away, but there's just a tantalizing tidbit for the first story. We've got authors literally from all over the world. We have authors from Norway. We've got authors from Australia. Sami Shah's a Pakistani Australian. He writes books. He's a radio host, like some huge names. We've got writers from Iceland, from US, from Europe, from Canada, like all over the place. So it's truly an international project created through stories from authors all over the world.
Cool. Great. I am super excited about it. I think short stories are one of those, it's kind of like when you decide you want to eat appetizers for a meal, like it's the same thing, but they're like little bits of it, and you can just kind of devour them in one setting and move to the next one, then go back to that one, and then explore the author's other works outside of that anthology. So it's a great way to introduce yourself to new authors as well. So
totally. Well, I can tell you the advanced reviewers, we've got about a dozen advanced reviewers, and all of them, so every person has come back and said, this isn't enough. Like, we need more of this character and this character and this character. So anyways, who knows what's going to happen with that?
Yeah.
But
that's why Outland likes to do the world, so that we can expand upon our worlds, and we can take these great beloved characters and do other things with them. And
totally.
Yeah, so that's cool. That's cool. Okay. That's all I got. You got anything else you want to add? Oh, I do want to mention, and we briefly mentioned it, but you are one of the writers for Old Norse for Modern Times, which is a modern phrase book. It has phrases that are affiliated with like video games and television and Marvel heroes. Yes. But it's in
role playing. Yep.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's all the nerd stuff. All the nerd stuff that you could possibly want is in there. And it's super fun. And that's part of the Viking verse. And there are packages. Once a world is developed with Outland, we package it up so that you can buy all of it and experience the whole world as it exists. So, hey, how's that mead?
It's great. It's nice and sweet. It's almost like a liqueur. It's nice. Yeah.
My ears are a little warm.
It's settling in nicely there. Yeah. Give a quick shout out to Ian Sharp, who's the creator of the Viking verse. His Jotun War 4 comic, I think, is coming out on Kickstarter here soon. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, too. I think that's next month. So
next month, yeah. So yeah, keep an eye out for that one.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody at home. We appreciate you watching us. Let us know if you have any questions. Josh is super interactive. Join our Discord. He actually has authored the question of the week, so you might want to answer that one. And just stay tuned for more Worldsmiths. So thank you, Josh, for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tara, for having me on. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.